Ta-da. They can see this, you know.
They can.
Huh?
You tell me that every week.
Oh, hi there.
Hello, this is George.
Imboni.
And this is Adonai's Sanctuary Truth Classroom. The 1st of October. No.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, it is the 1st of October. I thought it was the 2nd. 1st of October, Tuesday. And we're going to be talking about chapter 19 in the book of Numbers.
Yep.
I don't do this very often, but I titled this one. It's called, What Do We Really Know About the Red Heifer? You heard all your life, we have, that the Messiah can't come back until they find a red heifer. And the temple has to be built. Well, why do they have to find a red heifer? I think 19 is going to explain a little bit that I've never heard before. I guess we better get going. Why hasn't the importance of the young red female cow, the red heifer, been explained clearly to us before? Read 19, 1 and 2, please.
Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, "This is a regulation from the Torah, which Adonai has commanded. Tell the people of Israel to bring you a young red female cow without fault or defect, and which has never borne a yoke."
A young red heifer or female cow that had never been used under a yoke. Then someone else has to, read 3, please.
You are to give it to Eleazar the Kohen. It is to be brought outside the camp and slaughtered in front of him.
Given to Aaron's son Eleazar, the priest, and taken outside the camp and killed in front of Eleazar. Why? My sweetie's going to read that. Read 4, please.
Eleazar the Kohen is to take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle this blood toward the front of the tent of meeting 7 times.
Gather some of the blood from that red heifer or red female cow. He is to use his finger and sprinkle the blood toward the front of the tent of meetings 7 times. Well, actually, when we read that, this sounds a lot like what the priests were to do for someone who sinned, I believe it's unintentionally. Read Leviticus 4, 13 through 17, please.
If the entire community of Israel inadvertently makes a mistake, with the assembly being unaware of the matter, and they do something against any of the mitzvah of Adonai concerning things which should not be done, they are guilty. When the sin is committed becomes known, then the assembly is to offer a young bull as a sin offering and bring it before the tent of meeting. The leaders of the community are to lay their hands on the bull's head and slaughter the bull in the presence of Adonai. The anointed Kohen is to bring some of the bull's blood to the tent of meeting. The Kohen is to dip his finger in the blood and sprinkle it 7 times in the presence of Adonai in front of the curtain.
When the entire community, now that's kind of strange, when the entire community sins unintentionally and it becomes known, use the priest and dip his finger to sprinkle the blood 7 times. Different setting, same instructions. Sprinkling blood 7 times. Then Eleazar, the Kohen or priest, is to watch someone else do something. Read 5, please.
The heifer is to be burned to ashes before his eyes. Its skin, meat, blood, and dung are to be burned to ashes. Hey, Ann.
That's in there? Yeah.
No.
Burn everything to ashes. Now, in all of my understanding before, they had to have a red heifer or a young female cow. And nobody understood or nobody explained it that it was going to be killed outside the community, burnt to ashes.
Mm-hmm.
There must be a significance for that. Burn everything to ashes. Yet while it's burning, the priest is to do something else. Read 6, please.
The Kohen is to take cedar wood, hyssop, and a scarlet yarn and throw them onto the heifer as it is burning up.
They're to take them. Throw! Now this gets real specific, but if you think about this whole writing in or of 19:1 through 6, that's the way it's all been. Throw not just any wood, no, cedar wood
Hyssop.
and the scarlet yarn on the heifer as it burns to ashes. Still no real reason why it burns to ashes. But we get to that. While still outside the camp, he must, read 7 and 8.
Then the Kohen is to wash his clothes and himself in water, after which he may re-enter the camp. But the Kohen will remain unclean until evening. The person who burned up the heifer is to wash his clothes and himself in water, but he will remain unclean until evening.
They're both to wash their clothes and themselves in water. Then the priest Eleazar may go back into the camp. He is still unclean until evening. The same cleansing is to be done for the other one. And they both, after burning the red heifer, are both unclean. This gets kind of interesting now. Read 9, please.
A man who is clean is to collect the ashes of the heifer and store them outside the camp in a clean place. They are to be kept for the community of the people of Israel to prepare water for purification from sin. Bless you.
Thank you. Not one of those two, not the one who burned, not Eleazar, but a person who is clean. In other words, this guy never touched the dead heifer until it was nothing but ashes. Collect and store the ashes outside the camp in a clear, clean place. Why? Those ashes are used to prepare water for purification from sin. I guess that's why it's so important. Adonai gives you instructions. And that's what they're going to use the ashes for, to purify the water to use purification from sin. We have read in some commentaries and most likely heard that the ashes in the water are more of a symbolic, not so much literally, preparing the water for a real purification from sin. No, scientists and really biblical scholars would never say that. Wouldn't those comments, thoughts, and their actions be contrary to what the scripture is stating? Do we, or they, need people to believe and follow their words and their actions, which must be a whole lot holier than what Adonai said to Moses and Aaron? I'm being facetious.
No.
Yep. when I first heard that, it actually made sense because of what science has taught us. Yet when Adonai made that statement, who are they, or any preacher, priest, rabbi, teacher, book or community, or commentator, or commentary, are they saying you must believe Adonai's words? Are they saying you mustn't believe Adonai's words, but believe them because of how smart they are? The truth is, they would never say that exact words, but that is really their intentions. They're so smart to show you their truth, which makes a lot more sense than Adonai's anyway. That huge road is just getting larger every day because of those people. Isn't it? That kind of makes common sense. Then what Adonai states in, well, read 10, please.
The one who collected the ashes of the heifer is to wash his clothes and be unclean until evening. For the people of Israel and for the foreigners staying with them, this is a permanent regulation.
After he picks up the ashes, he becomes unclean. Then even that person who collects the ashes is unclean. Wash him and his clothes. Then he still is unclean until evening. That comes up a lot now in the reading. Then it states, anyone living with them. This is interesting. Then it stated, anyone living with them. Remember, this is a permanent regulation. It won't go away for them. A permanent, to remain indefinitely. Regulation. It doesn't stop. It wasn't made so anyone has the right to change it to fit their belief or your lifestyle or their lifestyle. Now, what do they do with the ashes? After you put the ashes in the water, here is what you are to do with that. What would you call it? I guess we have to call it a purification with that water so you don't defile Adonai's tabernacle. But to the person, how important is that? Read 11 through 13.
Anyone who touches a corpse, no matter whose dead body it is, will be unclean for 7 days. He must purify himself with these ashes on the 3rd and 7th day. Then he will be clean. But if he does not purify himself the 3rd and 7th day, he will not be clean. Anyone who touches a corpse, no matter whose dead body it is, and does not purify himself, has defiled the tabernacle of Adonai. That person will be cut off from Israel, because the water for purification was not sprinkled on him. He will be unclean. His uncleanness is still on him.
That part never stops. I guess if you really listen to what it says, if you don't get sprinkled with that water of purification, you are unclean. And your uncleanliness is and will be constantly with you. I think that's what you read, eh? That doesn't mean that it goes away with time. You can't go to your preacher, priest, or rabbi, or anybody else and say, pray for me that I touched. No. It says they had to be sprinkled with that purification water. We don't know about you, but that sounds kind of very important to those Hebrews. My sweetie's going to read 19 verse 14.
This is the law. When a person dies in a tent, everyone who enters the tent and everything in the tent will be unclean for 7 days.
How'd that start?
This is the law.
This is the law. When anything states this is the law, that must be followed or there will be consequences. If caught, or when you're caught, when a person dies in their home, which at that time was their tent, everything in or anybody who enters the house for 7 days will be unclean. Then Adonai goes on and explains the dead person's uncleanliness and how far it went in the eyes of Adonai himself. Read 15 and 16, please.
Every open container without a cover closely attached is unclean. And whoever is in an open field and touches a corpse, whether of someone killed by a weapon or someone who died naturally, or the bone of a person or a grave, will be unclean for 7 days.
Every unsealed container is unclean in the house. Kind of interesting. Of course, a lot of this is interesting if you really stop and think about it. If you would go into a field and come across a dead person, maybe he died by natural causes, or someone killed him, or even if it's just bones now, then it states, even if you come across the grave and see this or touch that, possibly a hasty dug grave to cover up a killing, you will be unclean for 7 days. 7 seemed to be a interesting number.
Sure, she's a lot.
Then to be clean, well, remember the ashes of the red heifer, it said to use it for purification. I guess that gives us a different point of view of why they need a red heifer. It isn't just that they needed a red heifer because they have to have a red heifer because the scripture says so. It tells us here what has to be done with it. To find how that works, my sweetie's going to read 17 through 19.
For the unclean person, they are to take some of the ashes of the animal burned as a purification from sin and add them to fresh water in a container. A clean person is to take a bunch of hyssop leaves, dip it in the water, and sprinkle it on the tent, on all the containers, on the people who were there, and on the person who touched the bone, or the person killed, or one who died naturally, or the grave. The clean person will sprinkle the unclean person on the 3rd and 7th day. On the 7th day he will purify him. Then he will wash his clothes and himself in water, and he will be clean at evening.
When you read that, you get the idea. They take that ashes of the red heifer, put it in a container, and save it, because it says take a little bit of those ashes and sprinkle it in the water. I believe she read, take a small amount of ashes, mix it with the fresh water, dip
Hyssop
leaves, sprinkle them on day 1, day 3, and day 7. Is that what you read?
On everything.
Then it states on day 7 at evening, you and whatever you sprinkle it on will be clean. But what happens if you don't go through all that? I mean, what happens? No big deal. I mean, God still forgives me. Read 20, please.
The person who remains unclean and does not purify himself will be cut off from the community, because he has defiled the sanctuary of Adonai. the water for purification has not been sprinkled on him, he is unclean.
That person who goes against what is stated in the scripture, he is to be cut off from the community because he has defiled the sanctuary of Adonai. Interesting. This whole thing's interesting. How long are the Hebrews to do this kind of stuff for their purification? Read 21 and 22, please.
This is to be a permanent regulation for them. The person who sprinkles the water for purification is to wash his clothes. Whoever touches the water for purification will be unclean until evening. Anything the unclean person touches will be unclean, and anyone who touches him will be unclean until evening.
It is a lasting, permanent regulations for the Hebrews. Yet even the person who touches that purification water will be unclean until evening. That was what they took with them for the remainder of their 40 years of wandering. How often they moved, where they stayed, what they were doing doesn't seem to be in the scriptures until they end up at the real familiar place again. See, that all took place in those 40 years. Excuse me, my nose itches. That all took place in that 40 years. They aren't in the promised land yet. But here's what they're told to do. Not much is to have been recorded about this, about where they were wandering, actually about what they did, until the area of Kadesh. Again, my sweetie's going to read Numbers 13:26.
And went to Moses, Aaron, and the entire community of the people of Israel at Kadesh in the Paran desert, where they brought back word to them and to the entire community and showed them the fruit of the land.
Remember, that's why they met him and told him about how great the land was, in Kadesh, in the Paran desert. That's when they came back with all those fruits and grapes and everything, and they were so scared. And it seems like it seems in the middle of the Tzazan desert, to the north of the Paran desert, to the south. The Hebrews stayed in that area when they sent out the 12 leaders to explore the land of Canaan. I didn't remember that, put that down there. You remember that incident. You remember 10 of those 12 died. 2 lived, and because of their turning their backs and the rebellion against Adonai, started the real nomad living for them for 40 years. Not having a place. Wandering in the desert. Nomads. But now, they're back in Kadesh. And everything will, now they're back in Kadesh. And everything is and will be great from now on. Let me give you one sentence from the beginning of next week. Well, maybe not as great as one might think. In some cases, not even good. That's the beginning of next week, where we're going to go over chapter 20. of Numbers.
You see
But
what Anne said? Very specific.
It's very specific what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to be, was a command from Adonai.
Mm-hmm.
His consequences. And it was something that it seems like the world has taken the Old Testament and discarded a lot of it through time. Not just the Hebrews. We know they have at times. That's why they've wandered. That's why they've went away and came back, went away and came back. Had good kings, bad leaders, good leaders. But see, when I first got this, started reading this, it dawned to me that no preacher or priest or rabbi has ever given me instructions of why they needed the red heifer when he comes back. They have to have it built, the temple rebuilt. Then the red heifer is for their purification again when Yeshua comes back.
Yep, me too.
Yeah, we are too, Chad. Howdy. Glad I got to see this one. Well, we are too. Well, that's it for tonight. It was just amazing to me when I got done studying and I realized that that's really important, the red heifer, and what they're supposed to do with it, and what's going to happen. They need it for purification, not just to have a red heifer. And I hope you all have a fantastic week. Hope everything goes good with you. I hope that if the storm rattled your cages a little, that everything bounces back. Have a great week. Tell people. We do have quite a few plays on this now. You have a great week. Bye.